Good morning, dear Jim. I got a little glimpse of you earlier this morning when I managed to tune in to the retreat for a little bit. He's a lovely teacher, isn't he?
Yes, indeed. I love his Midwestern accent.
What's his name? McGill, right?
Doug McGill.
Yeah. I think I'll be seeing more of him. Well, there you are. There we are. May all beings have enough water today. One of the suggestions from Tim, who's a regular person, Tim Akot, on our morning during the week, he suggested taking water to the unhomed people. And I took a case of water, bottled water yesterday, and it was very nicely received. It was ironic and bizarre, I guess. Here's these people. I don't know how big the encampment is, but quite a few people. And there were sprinklers going across the street that they had no control over and no access to. Strange. So, here we are. That song was Trina Trong, who is one of our members. Sometimes you've seen her here. She and Joshua were separated for a while. She was in Chicago, and now she's back here in Portland. And she's part of our PIMC community. And that song is from Plum Village, from the Thich Nhat Hanh world. Here and now. So it's Sunday the 20th. Oh, wait a second. There we go. Record on this.
Recording
computer.
in progress.
It is Sunday the 27th of June, 2021. The person that I think I am is Robert Beatty. And this is a broadcast of the Portland Insight Meditation Community. And I'm glad you're here. And a poem. I had a great poem for this morning. I read this not so long ago here in Teaching Land. It's called Distant Regard. And it's by someone called Tony Hoagland. I'm just having a moment of delight looking at your faces. Hi. Let's all wave at each other. That's kind of fun. Hello over there on the other side of the room. How nice. Aren't we lucky? Oh, my goodness. Distant regard. If I knew I would be dead by this time next year, I believe I would spend the months from now till then writing thank you notes to strangers and acquaintances, telling them, you really were a great travel agent, or I never got the taste of your kisses out of my mouth, or watching you walk across the room was part of my destination. It would be the equivalent, I think, of leaving a chocolate wrapped in shiny foil on the pillow of a guest in a hotel. Hotel of earth where we resided for some years together. I start to say, before I realize it's a terrible cliche and stop. And then go on, forgiving myself in a mere split second, because now that I'm dying, I just go forward like water, flowing around obstacles and second thoughts, Not getting snagged, just continuing with my long list of thank yous, which seems to naturally expand to include sunlight and wind, and the aspen trees which gleam and shimmer in the yard, as if grateful for being soaked last night by the irrigation system invented by an individual to whom I am quietly grateful. Outside, it is autumn, the philosophical season when cold air sharpens the intellect. The hills are red and copper in their shaggy majesty. The clouds blow overhead like governments and years. It took me a long time to understand the phrase distant regard, but I am grateful for it now. And I am grateful for my heart that turned out to be good after all, and grateful for my mind to which, in retrospect, I can see I have never been sufficiently kind. So let's be sufficiently kind to the mind this morning. To really pay attention, to listen, to observe, and perhaps to remind ourselves in starting out of the refuges, there are so many things that call for our attention. I'm important, pay attention to me. We can remind ourselves of the refuge in the Buddha, in the mysterious capacity of being awake, of being mindful, of knowing what's happening in the moment. Now, that's refuge in the Buddha, remembering to remember. And then, what do we discover when we remember? Well, we discover impermanence. We discover the Four Noble Truths. We discover liking and disliking. We discover the three roots of suffering: greed, hatred, and ignorance. And they all shine at us brilliantly because we're awake. And we do this in the company of friends. These friends right here. Let's take a moment to let it sink in. This collection of people are together with a very similar intent: to wake up, to become, to manifest love and compassion and joy and equanimity. No higher aspiration, is there? Could there be a higher aspiration? So please join in with me, maybe staying mute though, because it gets very messy otherwise. Let's join in with me with this little song from Plum Village, Thich Nhat Hanh's place back in France. I take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya. I take refuge in the Dharma, the way of understanding and love. Namo Dharmaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Dharmaya. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community of mindful harmony. Namo Sangaya, Namo Sangaya, Namo Sangaya. a year and a half ago when I had a pretty significant brain surgery. 6 hours in surgery. They made a hole in my forehead 3 inches in diameter and then dissected their way down to find an aneurysm that was ready to pop, to clip it. And then when I came out of that, my experience in the past had been coming out of general anesthesia was of a lot of love and compassion and joy, but I was on a medication that made me psychotic. And it was terrible. There was terror and almost no mindfulness, almost none. And I was aware of that in a way, and I had this hallucination, this terror hallucination, which was if I didn't figure it out, I would die, and I didn't have enough mindfulness to figure anything out. And it went on for some hours. Actually, I had tension and terror in my chest for some weeks afterwards. But the one thing I could remember, and I did as a practice, was I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. I take refuge in the Buddha. It's the one thing I could remember. Sometimes. Mostly I was just lost in terror. So, here we are. Not in allergic reaction to some horrid anti-seizure medication. Just subject to greed, hatred, and ignorance, which is in itself kind of a large dose of insanity. So, let's sit together. Let's do the ancient ritual of being awake in a ritualized sort of way. To notice this moment. What's happening in this moment? I have a little tiny fan blowing on me. It's a little USB fan. Very quiet. So there can be hearing. There's also a sort of rippling of coolness on the face, which the mind creates a concept of and says, that's wind. But the experience isn't wind. The experience is rippling coolness. And even that leads one astray. It's just this sensation. Notice where the body touches the chair. There's no thinking necessary to notice the life in the hands. To notice the life in the feet. And something that helps with practice is sitting still. It's sort of like a vow, a spiritual vow. That until the bell goes or the instruction is to end the practice, I'll just park the body here. I won't scratch. One of the local rules, like in golf there are local rules. One of the local rules I propose when I teach retreats is that that even though we might have our water bottle beside us, we probably won't die of dehydration if we don't drink during meditation. And for some people, it's very difficult. That includes Starbucks coffee, Danny. Of course, if one is about to die of desiccation and dehydration, then of course one drinks. But more generally, it's the willingness to park, which then allows us to notice the arising of desire. I want to scratch, or I want to adjust my posture. It allows us to notice the aversion, the hatred, the disliking that comes of sitting still sometimes. And there's something really remarkable happening here. There's awareness. And in a way, it can know itself. Mostly it knows itself by the objects that it takes, but to put it in personal language, you can know when you're here. And you can know when you're lost in the trance of thinking. The trance of opinions, the trance of worry, the trance of past, of future. One of our strategies is to be aware of breathing in and breathing out. It's a good one. I've been doing it for 50 years. The breath is always there until it's not. And we can sharpen awareness in a way by intending to be present at the very beginning of the breath. To watch it come up as we would watch a sunrise. When is that moment when the sun first peeks over the far mountains, or the prairie, or the ocean? And then we watch it grow into fullness, the expansion of the breath. And ultimately it comes to fullness, and then there's a change of direction. And then there's the decline. In the sun metaphor, it passes overhead and heads for the west, and then There's that last moment when the sun winks out. We can become profoundly curious of the nature of this breath as it comes and goes. And of course, there's the mind. There are probably thoughts, memories, plans, worries. Can we develop distant regard, intimate, distant regard to thoughts? To the very process of thinking? There's a very common misunderstanding that our very task is to stop the mind. Sometimes it will stop. Sweet moments of concentration and ease and quiet. What's much more readily available is awakeness to the fact of thinking. Awakeness to the fact of the body touching the chair. There's a very interesting aspect of practice also, which has to do with the effort involved. How much effort should there be? Ultimately, none. And there's a quality of intention to be awake. As we start out, there's a sense of a self that's efforting, trying to come back to the breath. One way to work with this is to notice, is there any muscular tightening? Are you tightening your forehead or your eyebrows or anywhere in the body tightening? And if you can release it, just release it. Awareness doesn't need muscular tension. And there's a classic image from the time of the Buddha. A person who had been played a stringed instrument before ordaining asked, "How hard should I try?" And the Buddha replied, "You know about stringed instruments. If you tighten them too much, they snap and they're sharp. They have no harmony with the rest of the strings. If you tune it too loosely, there's no sound at all, or it's floppy, or it's certainly flat." And so the musician learns the art of tightening the string to the point of melodious harmony. In my experience, most people try too hard. And so it can be helped by settling back into the present moment, taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, resting back in the arms of love. I aspire to love and accept myself exactly as I am in this moment is a fine mantra. I intend to love myself. I aspire to embrace any suffering that I discover, any sadness, any fear, any confusion, any existential angst, any grief, any anger. To embrace it with sweet, loving compassion. Right now. As the breath comes and goes, as the mind thinks, Notice the difference between being lost in the trance and being awake. It's completely simple. Either one is awake or not. in each moment, availing ourselves of the opportunity of being present. Present with the beginning of the breath. Present with thoughts, being lost in thoughts, being obsessed in thoughts. Present in having no thoughts. And they're just simply being presence. Present and knowing the realities of greed, hatred, and ignorance. Experienced as wanting. I want something. Wanting, 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 wanting. Or wanting something not. I don't like this. This moment is not to my satisfaction. The mind striking against an object. I don't like this mood. I don't like this body sensation. I don't like this temperature. I don't like this feeling I'm having, this emotion I'm having. Or ignorance, simply lost in the dream, lost in the fantasies. And these aren't bad. It's not like we're failures when we experience them. They're normal. They are the conditioning out of which we cultivate our awakening. And so there is breathing in and breathing out. There is liking and disliking. Mm. And so we begin to come toward the intended end of our training session sitting. Let's take stock. do an inventory of a sort. What's the nature of this mind right now? Is it calm? Is it agitated? Is it content? Is it discontent? Which of the 5 hindrances have been dominant, if any? Has there been a lot of desire or aversion? Has there been restlessness, agitation, worry, sloth and torpor, dullness, doubt? What emotions have risen into being? Has there been love and compassion and joy, equanimity, even for moments? Or has there been anger or fear or loneliness or sadness or depression? The notion of distant regard is helpful because ultimately these are all phenomena arising and passing away. So please let us really embrace this incarnation. As Stephen Levine used to put it, let us accept the healing we took birth for. And please now become aware of the places where your body touches the chair. Notice the temperature around the body, or that the body experiences. Is it pleasant or unpleasant? Notice the life in the hands. At any time that we are in contact with the body, we are not lost in the fantasy. The challenge is, of course, that if we're going to be in contact with reality, including the body, there will be both pleasure and pain. There's one rheostat or dimmer switch. Either we can dim reality out or we can turn it up. Please now bringing awareness into the eyes and the face. Notice the eyes as objects, as sensation. And then noticing the intention to open them and let them, then make the effort to open them. And when we open them, when they open, something pretty remarkable happens. seeing. Seeing and knowing of seeing. And in this case, there are these little portholes through the screen in front of us into the homes of our friends on the journey. And then what is it that we do with the mind or the heart at such a moment? Maybe I'm going to indulge. I think I will. Take me just a moment to find this poem. But I always think of it when doing this seeing practice. Here it is. I will post the poem from earlier and this poem on my blog. Turns out that the chat is very limited in how much you can post in it. It's picky that way, and I tried to post a file, but that didn't work. So I'll put it in my blog. Actually, I'll do it while Jim teaches the movement. So this is my notion of how we might look at one another through this screen. It's from Ellen Bass, and it's called Gate C22. And interestingly, it's in Portland Airport. At gate C22 in the Portland airport, a man in a broadband leather hat kissed a woman arriving from Orange County. They kissed and kissed and kissed. Long after the other passengers clicked the handles of their carry-ons and wheeled briskly toward short-term parking, this couple stood there, arms wrapped around each other, like he'd just staggered off the boat at Ellis Island. Like she'd just been released at last from the ICU, snapped out of a coma, survived bone cancer, made it down from Annapurna in only the clothes she was wearing. Neither of them was young. His beard was gray. She carried a few extra pounds you could imagine her saying she had to lose. But they kissed lavish kisses, like the ocean in the early morning, the way it gathers and swells, sucking each rock under, swallowing it again and again. We were all watching. Passengers waiting for the delayed flight to San Jose, the stewardesses, the pilots, the aproned woman icing Cinnabons, the man selling sunglasses. We couldn't look away. We could taste those kisses crushed in our mouths. But the best part was his face. When he drew back and looked at her, his smile soft with wonder, almost as though he were a mother still open from giving birth, as your mother must have looked at you no matter what happened after. If she beat you or left you or you're lonely now, you once lay there, the vernix not yet wiped off, and someone gazed at you as if you were the first sunrise seen on the earth. The whole wing of the airport hushed. All of us trying to slip into that woman's middle-aged body. Her plaid Bermuda shorts, sleeveless blouse, glasses, little gold hoop earrings, tilting our heads up. The best part was his face when he drew back and looked at her, his smile soft with wonder, almost as though he were a mother still open from giving birth. Whenever I pause and look through these little windows, that's in the back of my mind or the front of my mind. And we can put some words on it. We could say, may you be happy. May you bear your suffering well. And of course, in wishing someone else this, we're wishing it for ourselves. May you be cool enough today. May you always have enough to eat. Could be anything. May you remember your true great nature. May you remember to brush and floss every day. Take care. Remember to change the oil in your car. May you remember to pause before pushing send on those potentially angry texts. Whatever you'd like, but recognizing how similar we are to each other, how identical really. It's easy to be quite proactive on a screen like this. Well, I just got a text from David, and I was going to apologize anyway. I called you Joshua earlier somehow, but you weren't even here, so no harm was done. Funny. Why were you late?
Prepping.
Prepping?
Yeah, I start teaching online tomorrow, so I'm class prepping. So.
I see.
Yeah.
You're not anxious, are you?
What's that?
You're not anxious about it, are
First
you?
class is always a bit nerve-wracking. Everyone's just meeting each other the first time, you know. So second class things settle in. So.
Great. What are you teaching?
ESL. I'm doing academic prep for international students. So.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
Yeah. So I don't want to take over the conversation, but nice seeing you again, Robert. So.
You too.
Hi, Sandra.
Well, I have a familiar announcement for you, which is I guess this is familiar too. It would appear that the city permit department, if they grant our waiver, will allow construction to start such that we will be able to get back into the building. Are you ready for this? The beginning of October. It just keeps being dragged out. Someone actually on our side, it would seem, made a mistake in the calculations, and for the occupancy that we're probably going to have, at least the legal occupancy, we should have one more toilet in the building. And it doesn't make sense that we would do that. And apparently, we're filing an appeal, and almost always these appeals are granted in this kind of case. So, however, that then drags it out. When you give in the appeal, they have, are you ready for this? 2 weeks to give you an answer. There's something really broken in the system. But it does have us learning more and more patience. And every time there's an appeal, there's a filing fee. This time, for some reason, the fee is only $150 rather than $501. It's quite remarkable. So patience with that. And the other, related a little bit, is that should you want to feel more connected with PIMC, you could always become, Cricket's here, Cricket. Cricket, you want to say something about Donna? You don't have to.
What would you like me to say?
Well, whatever. You're always very eloquent about it. Cricket is our esteemed bookkeeper and much more, but she knows everything that's going on financially.
Well, it's just Donna is always appreciated, because the fact that even though we're not meeting in the building, our expenses continue to go on, and we want to be able to have our beautiful facility available to us when we are able to get back. So we appreciate any help that people can give, and Donna, is not always just financial. It's also help around the building that we can use as we get back, and help in the yard and the garden. So any way that people can be generous to PIMC is appreciated.
Thank you, Cricket. I'm going to out you. Cricket is a dancer. And she, how many people were in that thing you were putting together last week?
It was last month, and there were 1,600 people that registered. And so that was great. We're hoping to have 2,000 registered for our event at the end of July. So lots of people out there who enjoy dancing.
Thanks, Cricket. I think at the bottom of Cricket's email it says, "Life without dancing is a waste of feet." Is that it? Did I get it?
Not dancing is a waste of feet.
Oh, there it is. Thank you. All right, Mr. Dalton, would you care to be the master of mindful movement?
We brought Lynn Poe today, yes. Anyone that would like to stretch and move and bring mindfulness to movement, you can find a little space wherever you are. Just stretch out to the left and to the right and forward and back.
Oh, I can do that here, couldn't I?
All right. Put myself on spotlight. Using this form with 2 arms, 2 legs, and this round thing on the top. Let's just take that round thing and move it back and forth. Robert talked about taking a vow to sit still during a seated meditation. Sometimes that effort to stay still lines up all kinds of tension in my neck. So then I drop my chin and let it flow across my chest. So the chin moving feels like this. The back of my neck feels like this. Already my shoulders are starting to loosen, feeling like this. And pausing in the center, lifting the chin, glancing up to the seam between the ceiling and the wall, and then dropping the chin straight down. Feels like this. Lifting, dropping. It feels like this. Moving towards stillness, we feel like this. I've been online on retreat with a fellow from Minnesota giving a workshop on the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and he's using Ajahn Sumedho's famous summary of the teachings. This moment is like this. And so we have applied that to the body and to the mood and to the thoughts. And later this afternoon, he's going to give a talk on the dhammas, the mental habits that we have. So we can apply this simple teaching. It's like this, to just raising one arm like this and then releasing. So it feels like this, to move slowly, letting awareness settle, maybe on the elbow, or the shoulder, or the fingertips. We have this amazing ability to focus attention on a very precise part of the body. If we close our eyes, we focus on a precise sensation that we call the palm of the hand, or the sensation called awareness of the back of the hand, the wrist. We call it the wrist, but Robert talks about it as a cloud of sensation, not in the sense of obscuring the wrist, but allowing the individual sensations to gather like droplets in a cloud. When the palm is out and up, the wrist feels this way. When the arm is extended, the wrist feels that way. And then resting feels like this. Sensations in the left hand as we lift the same way. Staying with the wrist again, this cloud of sensations. It's related to sensations of the arm, related to the sensations of the fingers, but it's somewhere in between. Doesn't have a real boundary, they're just points of awareness. Bingo, like bubbles popping. And the next time we lift this hand, we can lift the opposite heel and feel the weight shift. The weight moves like this, switching one hand, one heel, and the center of gravity sliding over easily, relaxing the muscles in the hips that have been so still and so quiet and perhaps stagnant, locked from sitting. This pseudo walking that we're doing, walking in place, feels like this. The weight shifting like this. Sumedo is just giving us encouragement to stay with simple awareness, asking the question, what is this like? What is this moment like in terms of the body, in terms of the mood or the feelings? The slow, round movements of the body have an influence on the feelings. The mellow, relaxed feelings have an influence on the thoughts. The thought of walking in place has an influence on the rhythm of the movement of the body. We know what walking in place is like. It's like this. The thought influences the body influences the thought, back and forth, in and out, mood changes. If we come back to stillness, let both arms rest for a second. The resting feels like this. Now what's the mood? If we sink into our knees and rise up with both wrists and sink into the knees there's a sense of agency. I can use the word agency, and you can look for it inside your cloud of sensations. Is there a feeling of purpose, intention, harmless purpose, soothing movement, change of mood? Bring a healing feeling to the flow of sensations in the legs, in the spine, in the shoulders. Soothing the tightness, soothing the stiffness. Harmless movement. Harmless movement we do for ourselves, and then we do that with a group, participating in a harmless healing dance, bringing benefit to all of the members of the dance, and then knowing that that will radiate out the rest of our day in contact with other people. So we're healing ourselves and healing our little corner of the world. One more time. Coming back to rest, noticing that the movement involves the body, the moods or the feelings, the thoughts, and there's nothing permanent in any of the movement. If we reach across and reach up, we can't continue indefinitely. We have that move has to release completely to come back to rest. Reaching across is impermanent. It doesn't go on forever. It's made to slip into the opposite, lifting and releasing, breathing in, breathing out. There's all sorts of rhythms to our life that are very grounding, very healing, bringing us a sense of ease and calm and readiness for the next step. So, bring our hands together in gratitude for a working body. We can still move it a little bit and keep it strong, keep it resilient. And we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, dear Jim.
And I'm going to have to leave in 15 minutes to get back to my commitment to Sumedo and Doug McGill.
Yeah. Do you know how long that goes on, the next segment? It's from 11:30 till...
Probably an hour.
Okay, I might pop back in. I like that Doug McGill. He's a good teacher.
Very straightforward, very knowledgeable of the sutras, and giving me lots of tips.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Jim. If you would like to access those poems that I shared earlier, they exist already on robertbeatty.com. If you've not been to robertbeatty.com before, I highly recommend doing so. There's some really interesting and beautiful, actually, information on the first page, the home page, as well as access to the recordings of these talks and much more. There's I should mention this. I forget. Mostly I forget, but there's also a way there to hook you up with your favorite bookstores and to buy my book, which is Mindfulness for a Happy Life. It exists also on Audible and on Audible now. So, mindful of mind, mindful of thoughts, as I sat here reflecting upon what to say, I had a flow through of memories of Ruth Denison. Like a tachistoscopic presentation of Ruth making her way quietly into the Dharma Hall at the North Wing at Brightonbush, where she taught for years, once or twice a year. And one could hear her come in, the door would close behind her, and then she would very slowly make her way up the right side, past the fireplace, and then settle into her spot. Also had memories of individual conversations I had with her that were so important to my life. And the word I is here a lot. I'm very grateful to her for taking an interest in me early on. My first real interaction with her was on, I think, my first retreat with her, maybe the second. And it was at Brightonbush. And I had learned how to do what I thought was meditation. And that was to get pretty concentrated and then to sort of slump and then to sit there in very little suffering, but almost no consciousness. And I knew that I was a really good meditator because I sat there longer than anybody else. Sometimes I would skip the walking periods and just sit, so I'd wind up sitting for, 2 or 3 hours, and I would clearly be the superior meditator. I would also stay up. I was always the last person out of the Dharma Hall at night. Some of you may know James Baraz. There was a retreat that we were both participants in, and he didn't know it at the time, but I had a strong competition with him because he was also a late night meditator, and I never would go to bed until he was gone. And then I would always be there early in the morning, at least for the first sitting, because I thought I was going to fight my way into awakening. I thought I was going to try hard enough. Makes me think of my family of origin. If I just try hard enough, maybe someone will be here to take care of me and love me. And it's not it's not the world's most balanced way of going through life, is it? So there on that first retreat, or second one, I was sitting there doing my usual thing, and Ruth came along during a sitting and shook my shoulder and said, "You, wake up, and tomorrow morning you stay in bed. Don't come to the Dharma hall till lunch." That was heavy. So the bell went, and everyone was getting up, and I felt terribly groggy as usual, but I stayed in bed because I was told to. And yeah, one wants to do what Ruth tells you to do, or wanted to do. And I stayed in bed and fell asleep till 11 or 11:30. I mean, I was exhausted, as I always was. And then and I felt very guilty, and like, I was doing something wrong, and I wasn't trying hard enough. And then in the afternoon, something totally different happened. I was really wide awake. I was wide awake, and I could. There was a capacity to see what was happening because we think on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. My need wasn't self-actualization. My need was sleep. And I had gone on for years. And her intervention was life-transforming. It reminds me of a story that Jack Kornfield told of himself, of going to see a famous Tibetan teacher who was famous for mantras and magical things, and the teacher asked him to tell him about his life, and he told him what he was doing, and then when the teacher was ready to give him the feedback, he's ready for the intervention, Jack, and the guy says to him, "Jack, teach less, take more vacations." He was doing the 3-month retreat, and so where that came from was gratitude for this lineage of teaching. Between 120 to 140 generations of teacher to student communication has taken place for me to be sitting here sharing this with you today. These aren't Robert Beatty's teachings. These are, to the best of my ability, what's been handed down generation after generation in different cultures, in different languages. It's an understanding of the human mind and human life, and the Eightfold Path, the way of going about having the same experience the Buddha did. And therefore living with love, compassion, joy, and equanimity, generosity, kindness. And Jim mentioned that this teacher, Doug McGill, is teaching of the 4 foundations of mindfulness through a particular lens of Ajahn Sumedho. And what we have in the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and really with all of the teachings, is a toolbox, a cognitive toolbox that can tell us what to look for, and also, in a way, where to look. We each have, and all have, some strategies that we use in order to feel safe and happy. And we live in a very powerful indoctrination system, that of capitalist, consumerist materialism. And I forget the number. I once knew the number of how many advertisements a child in our culture, an average quote child in our culture, has seen on television by the time they're 5, and it was a shocking number. It was something like 50,000. And the meta message behind that, not meta as in loving kindness, but the hidden message is that if you just get enough stuff, you can be happy. And it doesn't work, does it? I mean, we have to have enough, so we're not scrabbling for survival. But the feeding the consumption beast in us doesn't lead to happiness. It's never satisfied. So along came the Buddha and did his amazing exploratory journey, and then woke up, and then spent the next 40-some years teaching this model. So if consumption isn't going to do it, if the opposite of consumption, starving ourselves, isn't going to set us free, the Buddha tried them both, what will? And what he discovered was that awareness does. That we discover that we are not any of these desires and fears and wants, that we are that which contains all of them. We are that which knows them. So then, to what shall I attend? If I want to set myself free, what shall I pay attention to? And then we come to the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 4 gochuras, the sort of pastures of abiding. I can pay attention to my body. Right now, notice your body. This one is pretty warm. It's warm with a shimmering of coolness from this side. There's a little coolness on the left side too. And notice how precise your awareness can be. It's so precise, actually, and remarkable. Notice that you can pay attention easily. Notice the life in the baby finger of your left hand. I mean, how did you do that? Or notice the life in the toes of your right foot. And notice how they're different. And there's a distance, in a way, between the toes of the right foot and the baby finger of the left hand. Now we could say, so what? Well, we're developing a capacity of awareness that exists in the present moment, because the sensations in the body only exist now. I mean, that's cool, isn't it? To know that. If freedom and happiness lie, as all the world's great traditions say, in by living in the present moment, one way or another, then to be present in the slight shimmering of coolness here is to be present. And the Buddha he was such a discoverer, an explorer. He discovered that there is something that happens when objects meet their sense door, when there is sense contact. Meaning, when the sensation in the body is met by consciousness, then knowing it can happen. Right? The shimmering coolness goes on continuously, but I only notice it every now and then when I choose to pay attention to it or when it breaks through. But awareness and the object arise together, and they arise with something else, which is feeling. And the feeling has three major characteristics, possibilities. A feeling arising from contact can be pleasant, not pleasant, or neutral or indeterminate. And you could say, well, so big whoop. What's in that? Well, what's in that is the capacity to observe that with sense objects that occur at the eye, at the ear, at the nose, at the tongue, and in the entirety of the sensorium of the human body. And I just had another Ruth Denison memory a long time ago, 35 years maybe. We were sitting in one of her little cabins in the desert late at night. The cabin I was staying in, she'd come to visit me. And she brought a little tape recorder with her, and she had a tape of Ajahn Buddhadasa talking about this foundation of mindfulness, about feeling. And we made a deal, which was that either of us, I feel teary, that either of us, hang on, the mind is going on with this. 7, 8. She was younger then than I am now. Anyway, we made a deal. Either of us could stop it if we had questions or wanted to say something. And he was talking about pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral or indeterminate feelings. And he said things like, feelings drive the world. Feelings drive nationalism. Feelings drive war. Feelings drive, they motivate us because I want pleasant feelings and I don't want unpleasant feelings. I will fight over resources because I want pleasant feelings. So, since we have this mysterious capacity of being aware of things, distant regard, we can practice noticing whether a sense contact is pleasant, unpleasant, or indeterminate. Our raspberry bushes are in complete explosion with raspberries this week. It's the week of the raspberries. And last night I was out there in the coolishness after we got home from dinner out, and I was picking raspberries. They're big fat ones this year. They're so good. I'd pick a raspberry and then bring it to the mouth and then bite into it before crushing it, letting it be there as a raspberry for a moment, and then crushing it and then noticing pleasant, really pleasant, wanting more. Harmless desire, so why not have another one? Now, some people don't like raspberries, and the feeling might be, it could be disliking, and that would drive one not to reach for another one. If we practice in this way with feeling, we can become more and more sensitive and notice that feeling is happening all the time. All the time. A game I like to play, and I teach this often on retreats, it's a mindfulness game of a sort, is to go through the food line, not super slow. Very slow movement through the food line tends to create a lot of anxiety in the people behind you, so it's not well recommended. But to go through at a reasonable pace and to pick what you want, and then you sit down at your spot, your eating spot, and peruse your plate And notice that liking and disliking is all over the place. Look at that. There's strawberries up in the corner of my plate. Salivation happens. And no offense to the rice lovers, but oh, there's the rice over in the corner, and that's useful filler. Kind of neutral. There's the broccoli. It's just steamed perfectly. There's liking, there's wanting, and so on. Similarly, we can look at a menu, when we look at a menu, and we're then imagining the taste of that particular item, and there's liking and disliking. And it's quite possible to be very attentive to that liking and disliking. Now, at the beginning of this morning, I talked about sitting still. One of the reasons for sitting still is that we get to really experience liking and disliking. Right? An itch comes along, or a little thirst comes along, or an ache comes along, and the disliking can be really quite significant. In fact, it can get to a feverish pitch. I've tried the experiment several times on retreat of allowing a mosquito to land and fill up and go off and make babies. And one time, a mosquito came and buzzed around my ears, which is loud, and then it came right on my face and onto my nose, and I could see it. And mosquitoes have something like 10 or 12 different cutting tools, apparently, and I could feel it. It was so huge, and it got huge, and she punctured my nose, and then I could actually see her getting bigger and bigger and fatter with blood. I was not in a Zika virus. I was not, or a malaria area. It was here in Oregon, I think. So I didn't need to worry about that. But what arose was this tremendous disliking and even hatred and wanting to smash this little thing. But it was possible with mindfulness and concentration to actually bring loving kindness to it and say, well, have a nice time making your babies. Now, that could sound rather crazy, but actually what it does is it allows us to bear that which was previously unbearable. Now, to extrapolate from that in a different kind of liking or disliking, let's say you're sitting in the ICU and your most beloved is drifting mostly out of consciousness. And you don't know if this is the end or not. Perhaps it would be really useful to have practiced being with unpleasant feeling around little things like mosquitoes or unpleasantness around traffic, being stuck in traffic, or dealing with tech support about your computer. Learning to observe feeling as with distant regard, realizing, oh, this is unpleasant, this is negative emotional feeling, and I can bear it because I know how to deal with it. I don't have to become hysterical. I don't have to become angry in order to distract myself from the unbearableness. I can actually stay here and be loving and conscious. I can make skillful decisions. So feeling is the second foundation of mindfulness. And it's an incredibly powerful and useful practice. Stepping into the car yesterday, my car was like a furnace. How hot was it? I don't know, 150 Fahrenheit maybe. I mean, it gets really hot in those closed up boxes. And I slipped in and I decided I'm going to sit here for a couple of minutes and see what's it like to be in this temperature. Now, it's just a silly little experiment, so the emotions aren't the same as if one were trapped in that. But it was really interesting to watch at the body level, the intensity of the heat, and then what the mind did with it, and then the growing disliking as the body started to realize it was in danger, really. So there's all kinds of experiments you can do. You could most likely today, if you're privileged, like I am, let's just speak about that for a moment. Imagine the privilege of having your own refrigerator that's plugged into the grid, that's providing power. Not only does it keep liquids cold, it has a fancy device in it that creates ice. In the middle of the hottest days of summer, there's ice in your refrigerator, probably. There is in mine. And it's a fancy one. It makes the ice, and then it dumps it, and then it makes more ice. It actually fills the bin. You don't even have to use plastic trays. It's a level of sophistication which is extraordinary. Not one of those people in those tents all over Portland, the 10,000 or more people that are in Portland in those tents, not one of them has even running water. So anyway, we're privileged. Doesn't mean not to enjoy your ice. In fact, when you fill your glass with ice and water and feel its coldness, and then you begin to drink it, be aware of the preciousness of it, and then notice when that cold water touches your lips. Pleasant, unpleasant, or indeterminate. And so on, all day. So mindfulness of breathing is foundational and great. But in order to bring our mindfulness into daily life, mindfulness of feeling is really terrific. I just had another funny thought. It's quite some time ago. I was driving home, and I was not in a hurry, and it was not late. I was not late. And I was being somewhat aware of feeling. I'd been coming down Multnomah Boulevard, which I almost always do. I practice just being headless and watching the world come into me. And the mind was pretty quiet, and I approached the final stoplight before my home. And when I was too far away to continue driving and I had to stop, I was very aware of the disliking and the very mild irritation. It's like, oh, damn, I have to stop. That happens all day, every day. How interesting. So I want to just mention the other foundations of mindfulness. I'm not going to speak about them in any kind of depth. The third foundation of mindfulness is mind. And all the things that happen when your mind is expansive, you could notice. When it's contracted, you could notice. When it's filled with greed, you can notice. When it's filled with hatred, you can notice. When they're not there, that can be noticed. When it's busy worrying and planning and telling the life story and all that stuff, that can all be noticed. Distant regard. Non-attached noticing, non-demanding. And then the fourth foundation of mindfulness, which is vast, which is all the phenomena that occur, like the 5 hindrances and the 7 enlightenment factors, and that all these things of a sort, these experiences, and all of the 4 foundations share the opportunity to illuminate for us the truths of impermanence, dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, and the fact that the self is really a phantom. It's a process. So, I want to stop there and have some room for questions, comments, sharing. And as it makes sense to you. So if you wish to speak, please simply unmute yourself and you'll be here and I will welcome you. I just noticed thirsty, dry mouth actually, thirsty. And then I looked around, no water, disliking. Totally mild, it can wait 15 minutes, but that's how it works.
Hi, Robert. This is John.
Hello, John.
Hi.
Greetings.
Greetings to you, sir. One of the criticisms that has been labeled or leveled on the mindfulness movement or on the popularization of meditation in the West is that the notion that as the Buddha taught and as the tradition was carried down for thousands of years, it was intended for the most the devout, I say, or I think the monks, those who dedicate their lives entirely to practice, and that for the non-monks, people who are not dedicating their lives to this practice, it's potentially harmful. There was an article in Harper's a few months ago. I'd been meaning quite a while to raise that. I guess that there were a number of issues that article raised, but the one that was probably the most interesting to me. And I imagine you've had this question before, but I apologize for that. But I'd certainly love to hear your take on that particular concern.
Yes. Why would you apologize?
Well, I don't know. I figured I've been missing a lot, and maybe other people have raised these issues.
Oh, I see. Well, I am delighted to receive this question, and I would amplify it one more step if I could. Buddhism has been, from a modern sensibility, absolutely shockingly sexist as well. So it has to catch up with the times as well, with that. And I would just to clarify that the notion is in Buddhist countries that that women should really behave themselves and serve the men and serve the monks, and if they're good enough, they will then be reborn as a man, and then they could become a monk, and then they can get enlightened. So this isn't the teachings of the Buddha. This is the culture accretion. We are evolving out of being, I was going to say blunt, dull mammals, where power is all based on size. So anyway, not to get off on that rant too much. About 150 years ago, is that long? 130 anyway. Several very bright monks, Achan Mun among them, and Lady Sayadaw, who was Ruth Denison's teacher's teacher, they said, it's time, it's not right that lay people don't have the practice. That lay people were trained. There's no way you can practice. You can do the deep practices, but you should practice, and this was wise, you should practice generosity, kindness and generosity, and moral and ethical behavior. And so that created the cultures of Thailand and Burma and Sri Lanka, and which, except when they go insane and attack their neighbors or drive out the Rohingya, has created cultures which are very kind and generous and loving. However, 120 years ago or so, these wise men realized, no, the lay people should have access to this. And so they made it, that's why we're here, actually. They made it accessible. So, the truth is that now in Burma and Thailand, the two countries that I know a little bit about, there's at least 3 times as many women practicing deeply as there are men everywhere. There's something about our conditioning as men that doesn't lead us toward being particularly self-reflective. So, there's another. We have to look, I believe, we have to look at Buddhism as it is manifesting in our time now. And we are slowly addressing sexism, racism, genderism. We're really, like we at PIMC we're underway now with a diversity, equity, and inclusion process that will go throughout the whole organization. So we're interested in looking at our blind spots. Now there was something else that you were. Is this addressing what you were asking?
Yes, it is.
There was a really sad thing that happened about 10 years ago, in which Achan. Oh dear. How silly, I'm forgetting. Someone can remind me, who's the Thai forest monk in Australia who got in trouble? David?
Is it Ajahn Brahm?
Ajahn Brahm, yeah. So Ajahn Brahm was part of a ceremony in which 6 or 8 Western women were ordained as bhikkhunis. And the bhikkhuni order went out of existence 100 or 200 years ago. And now there have been nuns, but there haven't been bhikkhunis, and it's a much more stringent training. And in a lot of cases, the nuns have been around the monasteries and basically have taken care of the monks. But this was a great breaking with tradition, in that Ajahn Brahm kind of sanctioned this ceremony where the lineage of bhikkhunis was brought into existence again. And it was there were those who celebrated it, but the Thai forest tradition had grave difficulty with it, to the degree that Ajahn Brahm was kicked out of the club. He's no longer supported by the Thai force. He's beloved. He's an amazing guy. He came to PIMC a long time ago, and he walked in the front door, and actually it makes me teary. He went in, he shook my hand, he walked in, he looked in the Dharma hall and came back and said, "You've done something really beautiful here, Robert. This is great." He was very relaxed. And I think a very wise person as well. So, sexism is still alive and well in Theravada, and actually across Buddhism in Asia. But we're waking up to it. And we're doing something about it. And then there's another thread that I want to see if I can get to. I have some concern with and criticism of the modern mindfulness movement, because mindfulness without the Dharma is missing something. It's missing the precepts, often. It's missing the understandings of anicca, dukkha, anatta. It's very useful for stress management and for psychological well-being, but the heart of it is missing. And that, of course, is what happens with any any tradition that goes deep. There's going to be a lot of superficial copying, and much of that will be very beneficial, and some of it will not. How's that make? What do you think of that?
Well, it sort of brings me back to a more personal level in my own doubts or fears of going deep, as well as living up to or trying to consciously follow the precepts. I guess that's a little bit different things, but they're connected. But the fear that in going deep, that I won't be able to stand myself, and
you won't be able to what?
Won't be able to stand myself and who I am, what I have done, and I'm afraid of that.
Now that is a beautiful question. As we become more attentive, and as we're willing to look inward more and more fully, we inevitably run into attributes or memories of things that we've done in our lifetime that have been less than skillful, and maybe really less than skillful, where we've done things that have really hurt other people and ourselves. And that, of course, is the human condition. We all do really crazy, destructive things early in our lives, and sometimes later in our lives, based in greed, hatred, and ignorance. And there are practices which have to do with self-forgiveness. And it doesn't mean saying, oh, it was okay that I did that. It really wasn't okay that I did that. However, would I do that now? No. And part of how I learned to not do that now is that I did it then, and I experienced the agony of it, or I watched the agony on I watched the agony on the face of the person whom I hurt. And I paid attention. And so one of the reasons for Sangha, and also for having a teacher with whom we can talk, is that we get to those places and we think, oh, I'm unworthy of anything. I'm really just a pile of dog poop. And that's a pretty normal thing to have happen in practice. And the practice is big enough to contain that. So self-forgiveness is very much integral to waking up. And here's another piece of it, which is, and I'd recommend this as a practice that you could do, we could all do, is tonight when you go to bed, before you go to bed, write down 3 kind acts you did today. For instance, one would be, well, I came to meditation. It's an act of kindness to yourself and others. And then think, or a kind act, or an act of generosity. And of course, this is a great setup, because between now and evening, you could do 2 nice things for Martha. and then write them down. And then you create a journal of your goodness. And you reflect on it with some significant frequency. When you're driving and, someone's trying to cut in front of you, and you feel a little grumpy and you don't want to let them, and instead you say, oh, I can be generous here. There's an act of kindness. It can be very slight. Or someone drops something and you help them pick it up. There's another act of kindness. Because from your question, I would predict that you are overly focused on your shortcomings, that they've become blown up into this monster or large thing, and you've really not paid attention to your acts of kindness. Now, the Thais do this, apparently. I've been taught this. The Thais do this so that on their deathbed, they're flooded with memories of their goodness. Look at all the good I did in my life. How's that sound?
It sounds like a good challenge. I'll give it a go. Thank you, sir.
And also to remember some of this lack of goodness is passed on generation to generation. I can think about and talk about my parents, and they're now long gone. But there's some ways they were really inadequate parents. Alcoholism and so on. There's other ways they were really extraordinary. My father taught me how to do woodwork. And I remember the time my mother taught me, the first time I was in a hotel room with my parents, and my mother taught me how to cup my hands and splash water on my face to wash one's face in a tiny little hotel sink. I remember that. It was sweet. And my mother also I figured out one time, my mother planned, purchased, and cooked 15,000 meals for me. Good grief. Now, she was also, she was not very good in some ways, too. When she was 6 years old, she was sent to the convent and lived with the nuns. And there was a time when I was whining to my therapist about how my mother was so cold. And the therapist said, that's interesting. Have you taken into account that she lived with the nuns from the time she was 6 till she was 15? And she could be warm and friendly sometimes. She was a great success. So that, and then in our own lives, of course we do things which are really unconscious and not brilliant. Because there's this generational transmission, and there's greed, hatred, and ignorance. So we have mercy. We develop mercy for ourselves. And in developing mercy for ourselves, we develop mercy for those, I should edit this, but for those crazy people that attacked the Capitol. I mean, what insanity and what pain. How misguided can you be? And it could have been me if I was a person who watched the wrong, the different news sources. And so what we develop is a capacity of forgiveness. Still holding people accountable, of course, but forgiveness. Wow, look at how ignorance is manifesting in this. So, how's that, John?
Thank you, Robert.
What do you think about the question now? Was it a worthy question?
Yeah.
I do too. I think it was really helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we need to end soon. And is someone sitting on something you would like to share or comment or speak? Oh, there's Molly. I see you, Molly. Okay. It's a red letter day because Molly's here.
Hi, Robert. Susan here,
Hi, Susan. Hi.
connecting to you at 9 o'clock at night in France.
You're in
And
France.
I had an experience of disliking when I got to the airport on Friday and was told that they would not let me get on the plane, that I was heading to Switzerland because I'm American. And I was misreading all of the Swiss State Department news. And in fact, I was not permitted to fly to Switzerland. So in my reaction and unpleasantness and not being angry and being persistent, I figured out together with the agent that I would drop the second leg of my journey and get to Amsterdam and try and figure out how to get where I was going. And I spent an extra day and flew to Paris and then flew to Lyon in France and rented a car to drive here. And am extraordinarily privileged that I could financially consider adding more to my already expensive journey. But what the reaction of the unpleasant reaction was shame. That I should have known better. And I've been noticing that there has been a couple of times in the last few weeks I had a bicycle stolen, and I did not feel bad about it because I felt like it was my fault. So I felt shame, and I didn't tell even the people that live in the same marina as I do, and the bicycle was stolen from just outside the entry to the marina, so they would both be on the lookout but also be aware.
Yeah.
And I felt shame or ashamed. You know, I noticed the difference between the word shame and feeling ashamed. It seems better to feel ashamed than it is to feel shame. I don't know why that is. So I appreciate, John, you raising your question and having this opportunity to dig a bit deeper into pleasant, unpleasant. That is self-denigrating unpleasantness. And just another, when I used to work, I'm a nurse, and when I used to work in hospitals and worked with people that were difficult, we started doing what you just suggested before you go to bed at night, write the 3 kind things down. We started doing it for the most difficult kind of battle axe nurses that exist out there. And we created a whole folder of lovely comments. And at the end of every shift, we would stop and say, okay, what did people do really well? Who really provided good care? And we kept that for some time. But I would like to hear more from you about shame and how it factors.
Shall we have an afternoon of shame? Let me
Okay,
let,
I'll join.
let me suggest this. Two things. One is one of the original books on shame. One of the persons that brought shame out of the background was a guy called Gershon Kaufman. Gershen Kaufman. I did a weekend workshop with him years ago, and his book is Shame, the Power of Caring. It's very potent. It's a book that I got it, and it was just kind of blowing my socks off. And then about 8 weeks later, my then wife said, "Whatever happened to that book you were reading?" And I said, "Oh, gosh, I don't know." And then when I sat with it for 5 minutes, I realized I knew exactly where it was. I was just avoiding it because it was so potent, very unsettling. But what's her name? Brene Brown is a popularizer and very fine resource for shame. And when I went up to my father and wanted his attention, and he didn't lower his newspaper, I went into shame, because clearly what I was asking for was not appropriate, right? And the difference between shame and guilt, in shame, it's that there is something wrong with me. There's something flawed about me. And I know I was crippled by shame for much of my life. Something would happen in an intimate relationship, and she would withdraw, and I would go into this dark hole. Of course, then I'd drink, which would make it worse. But I would go into this dark hole that I knew very well since childhood, which was just crippling shame. So, of course, what to do with shame, like every other affect, is to learn about it and then turn toward it, and to feel it and know it and realize that it's not who we are. Does that help at all?
Yes, and it is new that I'm noticing it, so I'm sure it has factored for a while. And then in my recovery and resilience from having to figure out what to do, and so I rented a car and drove an hour and a half to not when I first got here, but later than today. This was yesterday. Today I subverted the border in that way because I could drive across a border I knew that was not patrolled, but learned subsequently that it's only at the airport that they're being as strict as they are. However, when I was driving, I was reminding myself, well, first, when I first landed to go get the car, I was waiting for the shuttle. I was worried about getting there in time. I was worried about being able to make the drive before dark, because I had to drive through the mountains to get where I am. And so then I started to think about, when I had some awareness, I started to think about, okay, where does this shame land? Gosh, I think it's in my shoulders. How can I put my hands on the steering wheel and also relax my shoulders and let the shame go somewhere else? And it's the very first time I've ever had both the awareness of not having unpleasantness because I'm self-blaming, and also the first time I started to think about where it feels in my body and where I was experiencing it.
Well, I have an observation of that, which is that the issue with shame for you is about 95% done now. Because once we become conscious of it, then you can start tackling it. Then you can, and it's hard work and it's blah, 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 all that stuff. But now you know what, it's like, it's revealed itself. And mindfulness will ever so determinedly open up, open up, open up, open up until you understand the roots of it. And then it may still happen as an affect, but it will be much less. It'll have much less effect on your life. Where in France are you?
I'm just across the border from Geneva, Switzerland. I'm in Ferney-Voltaire.
Oh, Ferney-Voltaire. My goodness.
Lovely little village where Voltaire lived his last 20 years.
I worked in Switzerland for 2 years, and I needed to renew my work permit. And I couldn't do it from within Switzerland, so I had to. I mailed it to the Swiss government, and my return address was somewhere in Ferney-Voltaire. And so I rode across. I rode across the the border with all the workers with a Gauloise cigarette, and I rode across. And I looked. I am French Canadian, so I have the. I can sneak that in. So I rode across into Ferney-Voltaire, and that's how I got my work permit back into Switzerland. How nice!
Yes, I'll be here for a few weeks doing some more.
So your meetings were in Geneva, in Genève.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Yes. But now that I've known that I can get across the border on the bus and catch the train, I will not feel quite illegal. I went into Geneva today for a picnic with my friends that are part of the Geneva Quaker meeting. There's a Quaker UN office here in Geneva, and I lived here for 11 years and was active with the Quakers, and today was the annual picnic. So I was determined to sneak across the border to go to the annual picnic, and
wow.
Heard many stories of what has happened over the last year with family members trying to get to Geneva from all over the place and being unable to being stopped because they were American. It's a new experience for us.
Right. The Swiss would be able to set up controls if they set their mind to it.
Yeah.
Well, friends, I must go. Where's that Molly gone to? Oh, there's Erin. Is Molly here? She's coming. Oh, there she is. Oh, she comes in like a rocket. Would you like to lead us in song, Molly? All right. Whenever you're ready, you need to unmute. There we go.
May all
beings be happy. May all beings be happy. May all beings be happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Molly, and everybody. Thanks for being here. Have a lovely warm day.
Remember, Robert.
Yes, thank you, Eileen.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Be well, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
Hi, Jai. Oh, the popping around on the screen is amazing. I'm a little envious of you, Susan.
Well, you would be welcome.
Oh, and there's Bruce. Hi, Bruce. And Mish.
And we could see if we could sneak over to Germany and visit Frank.
Yeah, I'm teaching in Germany with Frank in 22. We have a 5-day retreat at a retreat center that Ruth Dennison started that we're going to teach together.
Do you know the month?
July.
All right.
July of 22. All right. Take care, everybody. Bye, Joan. Bye, Sherry. Bye, Tim and Victoria. And Mish. Talk later this afternoon, Mish? Okay. Ta-ta. Prepare for the leap to hyperspace. All right. I was crippled. I heard it. All right. Whew, boy. Hello, Eileen. That's true. That's true. In the flesh, that is, anyway. Right. It's true. It's true. Uh-huh. Oh, that could be, yeah. I can see that.